Hey everybody, welcome back to Living Traditions Homestead. We are back to work today on our garden project. For those of you who haven't been here for the entire project, just to kind of catch you up to speed here, we have decided that starting next year, so next spring, that we will be switching our gardening over completely from in-ground gardening to raised bed gardening. This is a huge change for us, and really something that up to about a year or so ago, we didn't think we would ever do.
What we've experienced here on this property, which is our newer property, is that the soil behind us in this garden area is mostly gravel, and it's then mixed with a tiny bit of topsoil, but mostly clay, and it has not been very easy to work with. So we've decided to do this big project, as Kevin said, and transform this whole garden space into raised bed gardens.
So 2 videos ago, we ripped out all of our plants. We did our very final harvest of our plants for the year. In the last video, we showed you the raised beds that we're going to be using. They are a metal raised bed from a company called Vijayga. They are 2 feet wide, 8 feet long, and 17 inches tall, and we're going to be using 21 of them in this space.
Now, at the end of the last video, you guys knew that we had some more work to do kind of off camera, and we have completed all of those kind of behind the scenes projects. So we're going to start today's video with showing you what we have accomplished, and then we're going to get busy filling the raised beds in this garden.
So after the last video, we came out here, we swept a lot of the old stuff off of here. We pulled a ton of weeds and just things that were growing through the holes where the plants used to be. You can still see there's some, but again, we're going to be putting a second layer of weed fabric over the top of this. So we're going to be starting with a brand new layer. This current weed fabric runs in this direction here. Our new weed fabric, we're actually going to run this way. We're using the 15-foot wide weed fabric, so there will be 3 pieces to make up our garden. The garden area here is going to be 45 feet wide by 60 feet long. We're doing the second layer because, first of all, there's no reason to pull this first layer up. And by doing a second layer, it'll completely cover up all of these holes that are here, and it should give us a good weed-free environment around the beds. There was part of the garden area back here that we showed you in the last video was very lumpy and bumpy. We actually ended up pulling some of this weed fabric up in just certain places. I put my scraper blade on the tractor and I scraped that down to even that out the best that I could. It's not perfect, but it's a lot better than it was. You can see some of the raised beds back here behind us. Those are the 6 that we had done on the last video. But we have completed the other 15 beds as well. So let's take a walk over so Sarah can show you those.
Well, right behind me here are 12 of the raised beds out of the 15 that still needed to be completed. Again, the company name is Vijayga. We're very happy with them so far. We chose Vijayga as a company for these raised beds because these raised beds should last up to 20 years, and that's what we're looking for, is something that's durable and going to last. We did get all 15 of them put together. It took us a couple of days. Each one of these takes us about 45 minutes, so it took a good part of a couple days for us to get them done. Now that they're finished, we're ready to put them in their permanent resting place and fill them up with the soil.
Well, you guys can see here behind us a great big pile of compost. This is 25 yards of organic compost. When we started planning this project, we knew we had a lot of things to think about. Not only did we need to think about what type of raised beds, but also we needed to think about what were we going to fill these raised beds with.
And we knew it was going to take a lot of material to fill these 21 raised beds. And what were we going to do? We figured out that each raised bed was going to need a little bit over 3/4 of a yard of material, which was 22 cubic feet of material.
Right, a yard is 27 cubic feet.
Yeah, so if you're thinking about bags, how many bags we would need either, 22 1 cubic foot bags or 11 2 cubic foot bags, and that was a lot.
Right, for each and every bed.
Right.
So when we figured that out, it was going to cost somewhere between $140 and $150 per bed to fill up. And you guys, that was just way too much. Now, in the past, we've been able to get organic compost from a place here locally, or kind of local. It's about 2 hours from us, but they are all over the state of Missouri. But in the past, they have never been able to deliver to our location. We're just too far away. So we had a couple options. We were either going to not use them, or we were going to have to go with our dump trailer and get all of the material that we needed. I figured it would take me about 6 loads to bring it home with my dump trailer. So that's 4 hours of driving, 2 hours there and 2 hours back each and every time we wanted to go. So basically, by the time you do that, you figure the better part of a day for every load. And when you take into consideration the amount of gas it would have taken also, I just wasn't convinced that that was going to be the best plan. So just out of the blue, I said to Sarah, I'm like, let's give them a call and see if anything has changed there. And maybe if we order enough, maybe they'll deliver to us.
Luckily, we found out that just recently they started delivering to our area. The minimum order is 25 yards, which is about exactly what we were going to need.
We needed about 20 yards, but 25 is fine too.
And we also discovered that cost-wise, doing this, even with the delivery charge, was going to bring the cost way down per raised bed. It's going to be about $34 per raised bed to fill them with this compost.
Right, so $140 to $150 per bed for bagged stuff, or $30 to $40 per bed for this. And this is organic, OMRI approved compost. So that is very exciting.
Now, the company that we used is not sponsoring this video or anything like that, but we do get a lot of questions, or we have gotten a lot of questions in the past about where do we get our organic compost. The company is called Hanson's Tree Service. It's listed on their truck and everything. So we've been happy with the product in the past, and we're sure this is going to do a great job for us also.
Let's go take a little bit closer look at it, and then I can tell you what we kind of learned when they were here dropping it off. So again, you guys, this is 25 yards. This should be enough to fill every raised bed that we're putting in the garden. And you can see just what nice black compost this is. I wish you could smell it. It smells amazing. Now, because the company that we get this from is called Hanson's Tree Service, I always assumed that this material came exclusively from composting trees and leaves and stuff like that. But honestly, when we were talking to the delivery guy, who also works right at the composting plant, he let us know, because I asked him, I said, so what all goes into this? Because it is OMRI approved, it's organic, and I wanted to know how that all works. What he told us is that actually, while there is some wood and things like that in here, the majority of what is in this organic compost are food scraps from a place called Silver Dollar City in Branson, which for those of you who don't know, it's a huge amusement park or theme park. It's kind of like a Six Flags or Disneyland type place. It's a great big place. So they get all the food scraps that are left over from there, along with other attractions in the Branson area. And then they get green waste from different municipalities in Missouri, and then all of that gets put into their composting facility where they break it down into this amazing compost. So, like I said, we've used this in the past on a smaller scale, and we've always been very happy with it. Now, one of the reasons we wanted to do this project yet this fall instead of waiting to do this next spring is because there is a chance that this compost is still hot. Which means it's still breaking down, which means if we were to plant in this right now, there's a chance that it would burn our plants and our plants wouldn't do well. In fact, the morning that they dropped this off, I can tell you it was steaming, and so I got a feeling when we start digging in this today that you are going to see some steam and things coming out of this. So that's the reason we're doing that this fall, so that this can sit and finish composting and age over winter. And that might mean that it also settles in the beds over winter, and that's okay. If we need to top these off again in the spring, we'll do that. But by having this age over winter, it's going to make our gardening experience next summer much, much better. So we're back out in the garden area, and it's time to start putting down the new weed fabric. Now, we had thought about a lot of different things when we were considering this part of the project. In the past, when we've used the weed fabric on freshly tilled soil, it was impossible afterwards to drive the tractor onto the weed fabric because that freshly tilled soil, when you drove on it, would kind of, compress down and move the weed fabric all over the place. In fact, even walking on the weed fabric for a couple weeks after tilling would move it all over the place. Because we're leaving this old weed fabric down and we're not tilling this soil, I think we are going to be able to drive the tractor on here. What we had considered doing is putting down the weed fabric, rolling it out just as far as where a raised bed would be, then bringing the tractor in, filling that raised bed, rolling out some more, and keep doing that. But that process, I think, would take a really long time. So we've come to the conclusion after working out here that this ground is solid enough that putting the new weed fabric down first and then driving on it should be just fine. When I'm on the tractor filling these beds, I'm going to try to come straight on and straight off. I'm going to try to not do a lot of turning on the weed fabric. That way it has less chance of moving around. So, like I said earlier, we're using the 15-foot wide weed fabric here. This is going to be 45 feet wide, so we need 3 pieces of it, and then 60 feet long. So that's going to be a big job all by itself. We're going to try to get that done first, and then finally get started filling raised beds.
So a couple things before we get started here. We have measured out and marked out the perimeter of this new garden, the 45 by 60. We've marked the corners with poles, and then I don't know if you can see this pink string here, but this is what we'll be using to line up our weed fabric edges. Also wanted to call your attention to the fact that when you get a new roll of this, they don't have the ends melted. So one of the first things that we'll have to do is melt this very first edge so that it doesn't fray. Also on these long rolls, they give you 6 inches of kind of an end piece so that you can overlap a little bit without throwing off your measurements. And that'll prevent any gaps in the seam there, which would allow weeds to grow up. So this roll is actually 15.5 feet long. And guys, it was heavy, and but we manhandled it and brought it over.
So our plan here is to melt this first end so that it's nice and so it won't fray out. Then we're going to staple this edge in place, and then the two of us are going to roll it out. We're going to roll it all the way down to the other end before we start stapling the sides. That way we can make it nice and square here. The other nice thing today is that there's very little wind, and they're not predicting much wind, which you wouldn't think it, but with this 15-foot wide stuff, when you get a piece that's 60 feet long and 15 feet wide on a windy day, it can be hard to control. So we're thankful that it is a nice, calm day today. All right, we're going to get busy working on this part so that we can get to the part we really want to do, which is filling these raised beds. All right, we've got all of the new weed fabric completely down, so we are officially going to be starting with a clean slate here. That is exciting. But you guys, it has gotten a lot hotter than we thought it was going to get today. It's actually in the low 90s and humid. So this is as far as we're going to get today, at least until it cools down a little bit. So we will catch back up with you guys in a little bit, either tomorrow morning or whenever we can get out here in some nice cool weather. Well, it's the next morning. We're back out here ready to get to work on the raised bed garden. We just got done with morning chores, so it's still pretty nice out right now. It is going to get hot again today, but we're going to see how far we can get on this project. It's time to start actually setting the beds in place and then filling them up.
The first row of raised beds is going to be 8 feet away from basically the back of the garden area, and that's here. So in order to make sure that we have them all lined up as perfectly as we can, we're going to be using some marking string, or whatever that's called.
Mason string.
Mason string. We're going to measure from the back to 8 feet and then run a string to 8 feet at the other side as well. Now our weed fabric here has lines going this way, so we can measure the distance from the edges to where the raised beds need to be. But this way we don't have any guide. So basically we're going to be creating kind of a grid that will help us measure where we're going to put these raised beds so they all look uniform and all look neat and tidy.
The lines on the weed fabric are 1 foot apart, so that helps us be able to measure in that direction, and that will make this project a lot easier and a lot faster. So I'm going to go down to the other side. Sarah's going to stay here. We're going to run a string across 8 feet from the back of the garden, and then we can start putting our raised beds in place. Now that we've got our line run across here, we can measure where our first raised bed is going to go, which is going to be 6 feet from the edge over here. Because we're doing an odd number, 45 feet, it'll end up being 6 feet of space on this side and 5 feet on that side. Not a big deal, but just that's how it's going to end up. So we're going 6 feet from this edge, and that's where the end of the first raised bed will go.
I think it's here.
And then, now that we have our first raised bed, our next one, there will be 5 feet in between each one.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right at this one. Well, this is officially our first row of raised beds. Now it's time to fill these up, and then we can move on to the next row. Okay, the first row is completely done and filled. Man, it makes short work of a big project to be able to use the tractor. We really are confident using the tractor on the weed fabric. Even though you can see the tracks on the weed fabric, it's not denting in. I went and checked a couple of times. So it's working really well to use the bucket and just go slow to make sure as little soil dumps onto the weed fabric as possible. We've had a little spill, a couple spills here and there, but we will make sure to sweep that up to keep the soil off of the weed fabric, which will make sure that we have very little weeds growing on here. So the next step is we're going to measure out the next row and set up the next 3 of the raised beds and get those filled as well. Well, 20 of the 21 raised beds are completely filled, but before we fill this very last one, I wanted to stop and talk with you about something that we've learned. So we cannot get our ground perfectly level in every single spot, and that creates an opportunity for the raised bed not to sit really flush onto the ground. It creates a little bit of a space in some areas. If that space is too large, it will allow some of the soil to spill out the bottom and onto the weed fabric on the other side. Not only does that mean we're losing some of our compost and our fill, but it also creates a small space for weeds to grow. What we have found out, at least in our area, that if there is just a small bit of soil on top of this weed fabric, a weed will take advantage of that and will sprout in that tiny little piece of soil. So we're trying to minimize that as much as possible. So I want to quickly share with you what's been working for us and a trick that we have learned to kind of put a band-aid on that situation, actually kind of literally. So you can see in this raised bed here, there is a space that is big enough for my fingers to fit through, and so quite a bit of dirt is going to leak out of there from underneath the raised bed. So what we've been using is just a piece of weed fabric, kind of like a band-aid or almost like a piece of tape, and we've just set that over that seam or that hole. And then when we start filling with the compost, I'll actually hand fill this area here and kind of pack it down there so that nothing can slip kind of behind it, and it will prevent any of the soil from spilling out underneath the raised bed. So that has been working really well for us. So if you end up doing a project like this and don't know what to do, that has worked really well. So let's fill this last raised bed and then we're almost done.
All 21 raised beds are completely full. You guys, it just looks awesome. It looks exactly like what I had planned in my mind. I don't know about you, but I'm kind of the neat and orderly kind when it comes to the garden. I like things in rows. I like things to be organized. And this is just going to make things look so much cleaner when we do our gardening. So I'm excited about this. I'm super happy with the way these raised beds have gone so far. I mean, we obviously haven't used them yet, but I can tell you that they seem really nice and strong when we're filling them up. We didn't have any like bowing or anything like that. It looks really nice. It is kind of a bummer that we're not going to be able to plant anything in here until next spring, but we're doing this on purpose because this compost, I don't know if you could see it on the video or not, but some of this compost is still kind of steaming when we put it in here because it's still composting down. So by doing this project this fall really is the right thing to do so that by next spring, this compost will be perfect for planting in. Now, I wish I could tell you that this was the end of the project, but we do have one more thing that we want to do, and that is that we are going to line the entire outside perimeter of this area with landscape logs. We went to Menards the other day. We picked up the landscape logs, so that is the next step of this project. And the reason that we're doing that is because what we've learned here in Missouri, and it may be different in other parts of the country, but in Missouri we have a lot of crabgrass that will grow outside of the weed fabric and then kind of creep its way in over the top. So we're hoping by putting the landscape logs all the way around here, not only will it give us a nice looking border all the way around, but it'll give us a way to be able to weed eat and cut off that crabgrass before it can grow into the garden. So that's the next step in the project. We're going to get some tools ready and then we're going to get started on that. Well, before we get started on the next phase of the project with the landscape logs, I just really quickly wanted to show you guys how much of the compost we have left. So remember we started with 25 yards. If I had to guess, I'd say we have about a third of the pile left, which is really pretty great.
And you guys, this is really going to be to our advantage because we know what is in the raised beds that we just filled. They're going to settle, that's going to shrink down, and it's really awesome that we still have enough of the compost left over that we can top those off either before winter if they, break down enough, or, definitely in the spring.
Right. I would say there's a chance that we have a couple of days of rain coming up at the end of this week. There's a chance just from those few inches of rain that these could settle quite a bit and then we can top them off right away again.
Having extra here also will allow us to use compost to top off the buckets that we grow in the greenhouse before winter, before lettuce planting and that kind of thing, but also just to be ready for spring.
Right. So we just wanted to show you how much was left. Again, how much it took. I think it probably took around 18 yards to fill up those raised beds. So we just wanted to show you that so you know we didn't use it all and that we do have enough left to fill these back up if they settle. All right, let's head back over to the garden so we get started on the landscape timbers, and then this project is pretty much done, at least for now. If you're not familiar with what landscape timbers are, they're a common thing here in the United States, but they may not be everywhere. I think they're actually the core from when they make lumber. It's kind of the inside of the wood that isn't really straight or real good for anything else. But they do make it into what are called landscape timbers, which look like this. They're pressure treated because these are going to be off to the edge. I don't care about using pressure treated. And basically all we're going to do with these is we're going to drill a hole about 6 inches from each end and one in the middle. And then I've picked up these galvanized nails. These are 12-inch nails, and these are what we're going to use to actually pound these so they stay in the ground in place. It's not going to be a really hard project. It's going to take us probably a couple hours to get it all done, but it'll make a real nice border around this garden area. So let's go ahead and put the first one in place and see how it looks. So we're basically just going to line these at the edge of the weed fabric. We are going to put it so that the weed fabric is underneath the landscape timbers because we do want, we don't want this just on the grass. We want this on the actual weed fabric. And then we'll just use these nails. Hopefully, with our rocky ground, we can get these nails in. So we've got about, I don't know, 29 more of these to do. We'll bring you guys along as we make some progress, but it's starting to get hot, so we want to just get this project done and wrapped up so we can take a step back and see what all of our hard work did. Well, all 21 raised beds are in place and filled, and all 700,000 of our nails and landscape timbers are in the ground.
This is a good project done. Well, you guys, it's done enough. It's mostly done. There are a couple things that we need to do off camera, not necessary to bring you guys along. We still have some extra weed fabric here that we kind of rolled out longer than we needed
Right,
here.
we did that on purpose.
Right, so we need to burn that off to make a nice clean edge here.
Right, you can see some of the old landscape fabric still here on the outside of the landscape timbers on the sides. So we'll be coming through with a torch and burning that off even with the logs and then pulling that all up. So there are some little odds and ends still that we need to do,
right,
but you guys don't need to watch us do that.
We are so happy that this big project is finished.
Right.
It was a lot of hard work and we've been planning it for months, so we're so glad to get it finished, and now we have a whole lot of new type of dreaming to do.
Right.
Over the course of the winter. Seed catalogs have a renewed sense of excitement because we're planting in raised beds.
Right.
It's going to be a really great and fun growing season.
Right. I even think Sarah's going to have a spot to move some of her herbs to out here. Yep. I think this is going to be more beds than we need for just our vegetables, so that's exciting too.
Yes, I have lots of ideas, so I'm excited to get started on them.
So you guys, that's where we're going to end today's video. We sure are glad that you came along over the course of the last really 3 or 4 days that we were working on this project. It has been, I think it turned out even better than what we had pictured in our minds, and I'm really excited about that. If you want to learn more about these garden beds, remember these are by a company called Vijayga. We did a ton of research before we decided what company we wanted to go with for these beds. They have also offered a 10% discount for any of our subscribers if you use the link that we'll post in the description of this video. It's also on our website, and we'll pin a comment with it, so if you want to check them out, you can. But you guys, I think these are going to be a very, very good asset here on the homestead. You guys, if you're enjoying our videos and videos like this, make sure that you hit the subscribe button. And remember that the best way you can help us here on the homestead is just to share our videos on your social media. Until next time, thank you so much for stopping by our homestead. Take care and God bless. God bless.